Hair
Also,
looks good. Mine is. I just went, clipper cut for because I can't deal.
dude, honestly, I think my girlfriend always tells me not to do this because I do have a good head of hair. But I was like, man, in my like mid 30s, I think I'm gonna go for the like buzz cut and like clear glasses, like just aged, like just distraught, weathered designer look. Try and rock that
You
for a
painted
little
the whole
bit,
picture.
Go for the Johnny Ives look, right?
I didn't make comparison right away, but all right. Let me make one quick cast. So somebody knows we're here. Um, I didn't even make the Luma thing because it was pretty, at the heels of yesterday's stream. So I wanted to do like a surprise one and see what happened. Um, Sneaky live with Niklaus right now. Cool. There you go. We're good. We can just talk. I I was thinking about. First of all, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, man.
I just thought, I don't know. I just had like an epiphany. Hey, what? I'm working on this my website, my pricing, my services. Nick is working on the same thing. So like let's work on it at the same time in public, because why not? And I thought about like a while ago when I was doing I started the whole design subscription thing 2 years ago now.
Hmm.
And it's been intense in general, right? Also life, I had when I started, I have one kid, now I have two, so it's not just
Yeah.
the design itself, right? But the work is a lot, which is good. I've always liked that. I don't know if it's an original quote from Flawed and Opsis: the reward from good work is more work, but it like it resonates, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And so just I had my head busy, my hands busy. That was my point. And
Yeah.
I've been wanting to get into like a good 50-50 working and marketing and and communicating, which is what all the big designers do on X. um and I had a few ideas for posts and stuff. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about was the a, like an overview of all the possible ways that designers can charge for work. Like
Yeah.
classic hourly project design subscriptions, sprints, and each has its own pros and cons. Um,
Totally.
right. But
Yeah.
I do think that the one point I wanted to make is that in each like age of the internet, there was one that was pushed more for whatever reasons, and there was that whole crowdsourcing. Remember that?
Hmm.
So that was a shit show,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And like I just wanted to like my quick comparison, and I want to hear what you thought about this. Is that when that was the mainstream, let's say, mode of working with designers, right? And the gig, each individual contract, even though it wasn't a contract, it was a, a what, 5, 10, 20, $50 work. um Maybe you like the designer as a client, you work with him or her again, but there was another small thing. Compared to design subscriptions, where there's a possibility, if there's a fit, that you work together for a while. I
Right.
think the second one is it's much better for both, everyone involved, the option of it being there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. I've been in this pricing world like deep in it the last like couple of weeks. Because yeah, I'm trying to build out a studio, my own solo studio right now.
How's it
And
going?
well, pricing is a pain in the ass, like how do you
Yes.
figure out the pricing model? And you're right, there are so many different ways. And actually, I was reading Dan Mall's book on pricing design, and it's pricing design. I think it's
Let me check it out.
pricingdesignbook.com.
All right.
His philosophy is centered in value-based pricing, right? Which is
Right.
sort of like, I guess you could consider that like the final form of like traditional like project-based agency pricing, right? Where you're pricing per project, but what you're really doing is during the discovery process, like diving in deep with your client to understand like, okay, not only am I trying to understand their problem, but like what is the potential result of this work going to create for them, right? If I design this website, what's the value that's going to create for their business and pricing based on that, right? So it's like this 4D chess game of I know the value of like my time and what I need to like price my work at to overcome my costs and also like get X amount of profit, but also what is the like perceived value or like really like estimated or modeled value that I'm going to create for this client, and let me just price that at like 10% of that total value, right? So if I create a website for a client and it's going to create $200,000 of revenue for them in the next 6 months or something, right? That's their goal. Then okay, that website's $20,000, right? Flat, plus like whatever profit that I need to make and whatever like expenses that I need to account for, right? So I might start at that 20,000 and then add on the like 5K that I need to cover my housing and operating costs of my studio. It's a
Right.
really cool book and a really cool philosophy, but you know, it's a philosophy, right? It's a pricing model. And the subscription model is something I've actually been personally looking at more and more. I think
Mm.
it's like it's been an emergent trend with designers, and it's really appealing to me. Uh, More so because of like how I'm trying to position my studio and my practice, as less of like an agency and more as like a long-term partnership with
Mm.
clients, right?
Yeah.
So that's like that's a more appealing gig, right?
Which is like a deal
It-
scenario, right?
yeah, exactly.
And value pricing, regardless of what I might think of value pricing, which uh, like uh, leave that for a sec for a second. Value pricing, regardless of how much money you can get out of the individual job, it's a one-off in general,
Exactly.
right? So, hmm, like I said,
That's
pros
the
and cons.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like with any design practice, any sort of consultancy or agency, right? What you're really trying to do is build relationships, right?
Yeah.
But when you're building it and billing on sort of a per project basis, less guaranteed that you're gonna get that return work. Now that's the hope, and you want to be able to like get clients that come back to you and you can price them more and more and more for, you know,
Sure.
similar work down the road. But yeah, it's definitely less consistent and it's I don't I've struggled in sort of my own research the last couple of weeks and trying to figure this out. I've struggled to see how even with this value-based pricing where you're probably, you know, you're charging more, you're coming in more confident and
Right.
able to get more out of that client.
Right.
Um, I struggle to see how that still overcomes the like feast or famine like
It, it,
style of a
it,
design agency.
it doesn't. Even the subscription model is not a magic bullet, a silver
Mhm.
bullet, whatever.
Yeah.
Marketing is the solution. I think if you have good marketing and you have a steady income, a steady pipeline of clients of leads, then almost any pricing model will work. I think.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but like I can give you a practical example here. I think I only ever had in 2 years of doing this design subscription. Um, Only most clients were one off, whether 1 or 2 months, but one off. I only ever had two clients, maybe three, no, two, that stayed for longer than that. And the best case is, case studies definitely Nanar, who are still my clients today. I don't think like they've never had they hired several people on Forecaster, but they've never had um like they never hired designers. They never had that position internally. And so I
Right.
can't be sure for, because of course, like if we didn't find each other early on, maybe they would have done this, but I don't think so, knowing the company for a while, that they would have hired a designer. So my point is that if I didn't have the option early on of having this design subscription, which back then was much price was much lower, obviously, right? And that
Yeah.
happens too. And but I don't think that Rish would have, like, you know, we both benefited from it immensely, as an early stage agency on my end, and as a growing company on their end, being able to work together in this like easy to work format. They could ask me anything that I could do, I would do it.
Yeah.
It's just easy. It just smooth things out for both of them.
Yeah.
Us. So
It's an appealing model, especially if you're in the space that, like, I'm making some assumptions about the clients you work with based off of what I've seen in your portfolio and your
right.
history with Nanar, and I kind of operate in a similar space. Like, these teams don't have a lot of money.
Mm,
They have a lot of pressure to grow and scale quickly. Maybe they raise money, and so they have investors to answer to, and they need to scale just like rapidly, but they don't really have a lot of time to like hire a designer, build out like design infrastructure, and really invest heavily in design, because they got to focus on the product. They got to focus on product market fit. It's rare to see a super early stage startup invest in a designer unless or invest in design unless like a designer was one of those founding partners,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So I think it's of great benefit. Maybe I'm a little bit biased here as a designer trying to enter this space, but I think it's a great benefit to these teams though, because they get to invest in design at a much more like laid back level,
yeah,
way lower commitment, still gain the value and the benefit of investing in design, but without having to, essentially stomach all those upfront costs that come with design
yeah.
early on. So
So
yeah.
so why am I doing sprints?
So why are you doing sprints?
Well, um, there's probably a concrete answer there. It's
Yeah.
because if you look at, I think industry wide, and certainly at my own work, most of the work that I did in within this subscription was web design, a little tiny bit of branding, but mostly web.
Yeah.
Which is also why Framer was a big part, in this. Being able to work with Framer was good,
Yeah.
but product is different. Like, sure, if you find a client and you start working together, you're both happy, that design subscription works, because the product takes months of development. But there's also it's also is it the correct expression to say it's front loaded? Like, there's a lot of work happening at the start to be able to ship the MVP, let's say, right?
Right.
And you got to run. You can't, because the way that the SaaS subscriptions work, um, at scale for you, for the designer, is that you have to put up limits to how many requests, what kind of requests, right?
Right.
So if the client, if the however good the client is, um, if they come to you with can you just do this for us within, can we launch this product within 1 week, but then you'd have to not have time for all your other clients, right? Then it doesn't work. That means a different type of calculus, right?
Right.
That's a sprint, but that's what product launching products means most of the time, I think. for,
Right.
for the product team, they need somebody who's on board with them and can just focus on that at any given time. And if you're like, if you're not just Nick or Antimo, but you're an agency, it's fine, because you can just throw more staff at the project, right, and
Right.
build more hours. Easy. But I can do that too. You can do that too. You just pull in somebody else to help you, but you need to work towards that in advance. You can't just magic people out of thin air, right? Um so, so um the I had this hunch early on that product was a good direction to move on, and then I don't know if you're familiar with Nick Bake Design from on X, is one
Mm-mm.
of my favorite. Absolutely. His the agent's called Baked dot Design,
Okay.
and he the reason I like him is that not just his design style, but just the way he communicates. He doesn't do like sensationalistic, oh, I'm making $100 million a month agency, whatever. He makes a ton of money, but he just, it's a straight shooter, right? So that's why I like him. And
Mhm.
he commented on this several times. He said, I will be posting a lot less web design in favor of product, because I've just seen that the average lifetime value of a web customer is 1 or 2 months, and compared to product, which is several months, if not years. And he's averaging 1 to 200K a month, so it's a real business decision. I'm like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Let me do that too. What's the quickest way to do this? Is to work on a lot of products. A lot of products on forecasters don't have design budget. So let me do something that they can work with. Um, and it's different, but it's pretty cool.
It's been a really cool thing to watch, man, honestly. I'm really impressed at how much you've been able to gather, like, in the few weeks you've been doing this. I mean, I still don't know how you're, like, managing these sprints. Like, it's you're like, it's crazy how much work you're putting into these things in a week. I don't know what kind of magic you're pulling, but, like, you validated that there is a need or a desire rather for design investment for these mini app developers. And I think that's really dope. It definitely sets a great precedent and a better foundation for more design to enter the scene,
Mhm.
and hopefully for more other developers, founders, whoever's got their experiment that they think they can, take to the next level to like see and jump into the pit and invest in design as well.
Yeah.
Um, and you're absolutely right. Like, product is something that, especially if you can get in and be that first designer to imagine what like a full end-to-end sort of ideal user experience, with a workable 0 to 1 UI as well. If you could be that person for a team, then they're more likely going to come to you again and again and again before they invest in hiring an in-house designer, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's a great strategy for sure.
And I don't think that, irrespective of price, obviously that's a factor, right? 500 and 5,000 are very different numbers. But irrespective of price, I don't think that I would have had the same number of takers if I presented it as a subscription, even if it was product, centric, versus a sprint. Because a sprint is much more of a, oh, we'll get something in a week, and it's going to be,
Exactly.
I said what it was. Um, it's different. I am. I've been loving this, to be honest with you, because I don't know. It's the opposite of, okay, hear me out. In a subscription, you're from the start as a designer, you're trying to do your best, of course, as usual, day by day, but you're starting on a on a defensive stance, because you're trying to protect your business. Like, you sure you want to under promise and over deliver on all that stuff, but you
Yeah.
can't do too much at your own expense, right?
Yeah, that's
um,
true.
right? So, but in a sprint, it's geared towards. Obviously, it's up to me to like scope it down and work it right, but it's geared toward giving something that you can go and work with after 1 week, or 2 weeks, whatever the sprint is, however long it is. And and so in the design subscription, maybe in 2 weeks or a month, they would have a good or like, um equivalent amount of material. But in a subscription is always in the context, oh yeah, we'll keep working on it, so this is like a work in progress. But in the sprint, you have to assume that that is it. They don't necessarily, they're not necessarily going to come back to you. In fact, the runner, for example, sprint, were working together again, and we're probably going to do like a much bigger sprint right now. But those 5 screens that I did, they're like the core of the app. There's nothing like huge missing. The main surfaces are there. And so if you do the sprint like this, even if they don't have the money, or they don't want to work with you again, they'll be able to use it,
Exactly.
which is great.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's about finding and creating value for who you're working with, right? Like, I know as a developer or as a founder that after 1 week, I'm going to have an incredibly useful set of assets that I can
Yeah.
work with, right? I know exactly what I'm getting. It's super clear, it's super defined. With a subscription, and this is part of what's taking me so long to like kind of dig through this on my end. Like,
Mm,
really have to, and you're absolutely right. Like, the incentive for me as the service provider is maybe I'll just like not work or push myself quite as hard, because if I can just roll this around, I'm not saying I would do this, but
mhm.
that's sort of like the subconscious incentive. Like,
Yeah.
if this project's, stretches out for another week, well, then we've just crossed that new month threshold, right?
Yeah.
Boom. That's like another $5,000 for something that could have been delivered in like 4 weeks. I'm not saying that I would never wanna do that for a client, but, like, if they're dragging their feet, then, it's hard to create that, like, time box pressure in that model,
Yes.
right? So you have to be
Yes.
really, really clear on what that offering is in the subscription. Like, I know if I'm paying for this subscription as a founder or potential client, like, I should know exactly what I'm gonna be getting
Yeah.
every single month.
Yeah.
And while that does leave room for, like, larger scale projects, larger scope projects that could take a couple of months, I should have an idea of like, this is something I need, and this subscription is going to like provide that to me month over month and
Yes.
bring consistent value. With the sprint, yeah, obviously it's like going and getting a meal at a really nice restaurant. I know I'm going to drop a lot of money, but I know I'm going to get an incredible experience for a
Nice.
couple of hours. And
Yeah.
when I come home, I'm going to feel really good about myself, right? And I'll be able to tell all my friends about it. But if I just like get Uber Eats delivered to my house every week,
Right.
like, after a while, I'm probably gonna, like, forget, that I'm not even pay attention to what I'm eating, right?
Right. A good comparison.
Yeah. I don't know if that's the best comparison, but it came to
I
mind,
was thinking
so
about the last time I went to a
yeah.
good restaurant, 21 years ago. But um, yeah, yeah.
What, McDonald's with the kids doesn't count as a fine dining experience?
Oh, man. It is though. I like
Yeah,
Starbucks a lot with my daughter.
that's
Yeah.
awesome.
But okay, so what, like, if you had to choose, like, gun to the head for your own thing, would you do you
Yeah.
think you would go with project, some kind of project pricing, or subscription retainer?
I'm leaning on subscription-based pricing right now,
Right.
and the reason is, what I'm trying to build. So my background, I don't know if is anybody live watching, listening? I don't know.
I
Um,
The forecaster is pretty much, you have to assume that it's pretty much dead.
okay,
I'm gonna push this, the clips of this. Restream does a very good job at give me clips, and I'll post this. Um, Long
gotcha,
term, that's the only way to get traffic back to live streams.
gotcha. All right,
But
well,
people will
I'll
see it.
drop it for the future audience that
Go
might be
on.
watching the clips, just for posterity's sake. Like, my background is in like branding and creative direction, right? That's
Right.
my specialty. And really over the last couple of years, like more design leadership,
Mhm.
and building design teams and design operations and like creative design infrastructure in organizations. That's what I did at Decent.
Right.
Basically, once I got out of the like constant visual design sprints that I was doing and moved into more of a leader position. That's what I was doing. So I'm trying to turn that into a service that I can deliver to other companies and other teams. So the way that I'm trying to position this business is essentially like fractional design leadership.
Mhm.
So less of like the time pressured, urgent, I need a product to go from 0 to 1, more I I'm in a business that or a founder, a team, organization that has achieved some level of growth, is in the middle of growth, values design or recognizes the need for some sort of like creative organization and management to be able to scale, right? Like Farcaster, for instance, great example. Even though they went with this like 1 week brand sprint,
Right.
they experienced a lot of growth and
It was
realized
a
now's the
2-week
time
brand
we need.
sprint.
Was it 2 weeks?
It was 2 weeks.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, I mean, either way, so they went with more of like a brand sprint
Yeah.
route, but ultimately they reached that decision point where like we're growing, our team
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
growing. It's like impossible for us to like manage our brand now. that's where I want to enter and collaborate with teams. But I don't love the sprint model for myself personally
Mhm.
because it's really high pressure and high stress for me. I can't keep up with that.
Yeah.
Long term, I think it's great for like short bursts. It's called a sprint, right? But if you're just doing nothing but sprints, then for me that would just lead to burnout. So I'm thinking more of a subscription-based model
Right.
because I want to get in with teams early and like help them grow their business and partner with them over a long period of time. So
And
it's
you,
not just I'm an idle outside vendor who's providing services for them. I want to like get in the weeds with them and help them grow their business from the inside out,
and
embed
you
myself into their operations.
you've actually at Decent. I think you've told me that you actually like you had designers under you, or anyway, you were part of a wider design team, right? It wasn't just you.
Once upon a time, I had several designers, strategists, copywriters working under me, as well
Right.
as outside vendors, outside creatives, community people, marketers, all that stuff. So, yeah, a few years back when Decent was at its biggest, before the accordion shrank again,
Mm.
yeah, I was probably managing a team of five, as well as any number of outside vendors and service providers.
The reason I mentioned that is that you mentioned that fractional design, the fractional keyword. Um, there's a designer I'm trying to think about on uh, what's his name? The one who also did the board game recently. Have you seen it?
Mm-mm.
You love it. Look, I'll tell you what he does, and then I'll go look for it for him for a few
Okay.
seconds. He has the service where he has it on his website, so you're probably gonna like reading this.
Okay.
He helps you hire. So he actually, I'm assuming he actually helps you like write the job specs for your designers. He screens, he interviews, he onboards them, and then he stays on as creative director, whatever the role is, so fractional creative director in your
Yeah.
team. But obviously, he's not a hire; he's a contractor, and that is something I would never be able to do, obviously, because I've never worked in part of a team. I'm a
Yeah.
lone wolf, but you might like it.
I mean, that sounds pretty close to like what I'm looking to build here. I'd love that resource, or that example of what's out there working. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of like an ideal scenario for me, is I join a team, I help them build all of their like essential, creative brand design infrastructure, help them find designers to bring on board full time. And then, the ideal like stopping point for me to like split paths and go our separate ways is like they now have a team that's like ready to go, fully equipped to be like fully independent and continue growing their business, and they don't need me anymore. Right. So like in a sense, my goal is to make my job obsolete.
I found the guy, Kevin Twohy. Ever heard of him?
Never heard of him. No.
Let me show you.
Yeah, drop me that link.
Uh, so this is his Twitter. I'll do it here in the private chat. There you go. So this
Sweet.
is link and X, and then he has the website. So if you got to scroll quite a bit. Let me actually share my screen. It's the first time I share my screen here in Restream, so I want to see how this works.
We'll see how it goes.
There it is. Nice,
Oh,
cool.
that looks great. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the two design departments and design advisory. Um, there you go. See, recruit, hire, integrate full time design staff when the time is right. It's pretty uh, comprehensive. Like if I didn't have this bit of social proof that he worked for, the National Park Service, Sony, New York Times, Fitbit, that I would Vice, I'd be like, oh, there's no way somebody can do this, like, you need to be somebody with really, really, uh, got to be really senior, an expert to this, for somebody
Mhm.
to trust you to do this, right? But it's the right approach. So I'm pretty sure you can find a way to work this and communicate this in a way that works with you and your potential clients. Like, sounds
100%. I think the biggest thing that I have going against me is I don't have that kind of social proof, right? Like I've gone the independent startup route. I've not worked with FANG companies or Fortune 500 companies, but that's not to say that the experience that I've gotten over the years is like any less valuable, right? And so yeah, it might be a little bit more of an uphill battle in that sense. And you're absolutely right. That's a great sort of objection as to why that might be a challenge or why you would go with someone else versus me. But yeah, I mean, I think that's something. Again, it comes back to relationships, right? And so if you can build a relationship and a sense of trust and sort of prove that you're a reliable person, and can back up what you say, then
yeah.
it's a no brainer, right? So probably slower sales cycle, but I don't know. It's an experiment. We're trying it out. You know,
Yeah,
it's
sure.
it's it's what I did to essentially create a job for myself at Decent
Uh-huh.
years ago,
Really?
coming on board as a freelance designer. And so I figured if I can do that when I was 22
Right.
or 25, or I was 25. If I could do that when I was 25, I can certainly do that now, you know?
Sure you can. How
Yeah,
old are you now?
I'm 30 now.
30. Oh, shit. I'm about to be 35 in a few days.
Crossing the
Uh,
hump, man. But
why don't
anyway,
you
man, I'd love to hear more about what you're working on because you approached me about essentially evolving your sprints
yeah,
and sort of scaling and expanding your own design business. So like,
yes.
let's talk about that, right? Like, what are your goals here, and how do you see this? Like, how do you see this sort of crystallizing?
Just before I forget, though, so let me just throw this out there. What you should consider doing, like an equivalent thing of what I did with the sprints, and do this experiment where you first, you take a minute to define what you would be doing, just a rough draft, and then say, hey, I'm trying to relaunch my services. This is the direction. This is the format that I would like to try. Who's game to do this live in public? I'm sure you will get a taker. um,
Yeah,
with for a small fee, right? Not for free, but then you have this like public case study. I'm sure you'll get, that's a good start. Consider doing that.
yeah, that's a
Um,
great suggestion, man, for
Food for
sure.
thought, you know. Um, Tom Forecaster, there's this whole thing of transparency. There's nobody's got anything to hide. People who do have something to hide, probably bad actors. So right.
Yeah,
So I mean
yeah,
the gist of what I'm trying to do is very simple. Is obviously $500 design sprint. The way I've been doing it is, I don't even know how to call it. It's a stunt. It's not a stunt because I'm actually delivering the work, right? So it's not a stunt in that sense, but it's a stunt in as a whole thing, because it's not just, I
it's a great
could make,
marketing campaign.
sorry, yes, that's,
Yeah.
yes. I didn't. So the one thing I think is interesting to say, which is probably a good lesson for myself, and others, is that it wasn't like a master plan. Like I went through phases of master planning in the past few months, and this
Yeah.
wasn't an output of that. This was for the moment. Even the fact, actually, that now it's I make it clear to you, if you participate in the sprint, that it's public. This wasn't the case at the beginning. I just had this idea, and I just hit up every one of the first few five participants, like, hey, do you want to do it in public? They're like, yeah, who cares? Let's do it. And then I just did it for as a requirement, and it became marketing, you know, campaign in doing that.
Mhm.
Um, but my point is that obviously $500 is gonna have to be narrow scope, right? Obviously. Um,
Right.
I've actually been working with, I don't know if you saw that cast I made late last night about the fact that I've been working with a junior designer that I found on Farcaster.
Mhm.
And so I did have the idea of using the sprints as a way to put as a trial by fire for younger designers who would then be able to help me on bigger projects. Bigger projects being, call them what you want, like full size sprints, regardless of price. Uh, I here I just had this like random idea pop in my head. Maybe a good mental model is that a sprint could be priced just right under the amount of money that you would pay for half a salary year for in design for the product designer for a product, if it gives you that amount of value. Like if in the course of the sprints you can get everything you need to launch as many product features that will cover 6 months of roadmap, right? But front loaded in within 4 to 6 weeks, and then you're good. And obviously, I'm not going to disappear into thin air as soon as we deliver, but there's a bit of follow on availability. Then that justifies it. Um, but I'm not going to be able to charge that in January, I think.
That's the thing. Yeah.
I don't think, but in principle, this makes sense, or doesn't it? I have to ask people, but
I think if you're looking at it from a pure, like, cost of labor basis,
yeah.
then yeah, that could absolutely make sense, right? A sort of mid-level product design role these days, especially in tech, is probably going to cost you low six figures,
Hmm.
right? Low six figures, maybe just under six figures, depending on how stingy you're being, and what the job market looks like,
Yeah.
um, at any given point. So, for 45K, 50K, if you can get 6 months of roadmap built,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's pretty good value.
6 months
Yeah.
of roadmap isn't so much in most cases.
The 6 months goes by pretty quick.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
when I don't have so many years of product design experience under my belt, but from what little I've seen so far, um, there is so much that if you work properly, there is so much that you can preempt, like error states, actual design thinking, actual common sense, like shit like, oh, you have a username in your UI, have you made us a state for long usernames, and all this category of uh use cases, right? If you do that up front, if you have an approach where you consider, you check all the boxes up front, then whatever the roadmap is, it's the likelihood of actually hitting those milestones in the roadmap for the first 6 months is much higher. And so that means that the whole exercise is more concrete. Whereas maybe you would have hired a designer to work in house, but and it would have, the outlay would have been different because you wouldn't have paid me 40K, let's say, all at once at the beginning of the sprints, but you would have paid you know 8K a month to the guy, but irrespective of that, they probably would have done a slightly worse job because they just took it day by day, whereas
Yeah.
my I'm brought on to not take it day by day, to give you something that works and that's it.
Right.
So there's a lot of pressure, of course, and the expectation is higher, but if you can deliver.
So I think one thing that might where you might run into some trouble
Mm,
is you got to remember that startups, especially super early stage, that the sprints that you've been doing are essentially like 0 to 1 sprints, right?
yeah.
Or maybe like 1 to 1.5 or 0.5 to 2 or something, right? Like pretty incremental, but like significant from like a rough MVP that was maybe vibe coded and designed to like a properly designed sprint. Um, in that space, a lot of those projects, they're going to pivot like maybe 2, 3, 5 times in those 6 months.
Really.
And so one challenge you're going to run into is that even if they have the budget to bring you on for a sprint that, you know, might deliver a year of roadmap for them, that roadmap's not going to look anything the same in even 2 months from now from when they brought you on board, right? So if your goal is in like 8 weeks, I'm going to deliver a year's worth of you know features for you
Mm.
and roadmap, um, they might lose that value in month 6 on, right? Because they've pivoted or, you know, they've gotten a ton of feedback and all these things that you just designed for them are like no longer really usable.
That's a good point, but I don't really see it as a you just need to adjust. You just said, I know you're just throwing out numbers, right? But you just said 8 weeks of sprint for a year's worth of product. What if it's just 4 weeks for a shorter roadmap, like 6 months, let's say, right? Or even
Yeah.
a quarter. If you look at actual products, 6 months, like Betterment, just the first came in mind. It's still the same product.
Yeah. I think thinking of it more on a quarterly scope
Mhm.
is probably more realistic for super early stage products.
Yeah.
You know, if they're like actively building and gaining traction, those founders are going to be getting as much feedback from all their users as possible, right? And constantly working that into the roadmap and iterating on it.
Mm.
And so I would say roadmaps are more likely to change based just speaking from my own experience from what
Yeah.
I've seen out there. Roadmaps are more likely to change probably at that quarterly level. If that startup has reached or that team has reached some level of maturity where they're actually like planning ahead,
Mhm.
most teams are doing this on a quarterly level anyway. So if you can
Sure.
guarantee a team, hey, in month 1 of this 3-month, you know, cycle that you're going through with your product planning, I can essentially set you up for the whole quarter
Yeah.
until you go back into your next like, planning cycle. That actually that creates a ton of value, right? If the
Mhm.
team, if you can like find these teams and you know time it right, then essentially, ideally, you would be coming in at the end of a quarter to sort of set up the next one, so they're
Yeah.
not spending a third of that quarter planning and waiting for you to design, you know, waiting for your deliverables. They're already like ready to go once that new quarter starts, right?
Yeah.
So smaller time frames, you'll probably be able to get more bites in that sense, right? Deliver more guaranteed value than let's say 6 months of roadmap.
That makes a lot of sense. And
Yeah,
it's actually okay. It's actually a slightly smaller time scale, but one of the clients that I had on that did the private tracks, so they didn't want to do the whole public thing. We did 1 week, but he told me explicitly, he said, okay, you just give me a minute to actually build this, what we designed this week, but then I'm 100% going to come back. And he told me that he knows what we're going to do for another 2 or 4 weeks. Maybe they're not going to be consequential, but they're, it covers 1 month and a half of work, right? So like I
right.
said, it's not a real quarter, but it's that order of magnitude, right? So if I didn't have that service offer, I only had the sprint when we talked initially. So and by the way, he loved it. You know what?
Yeah,
I'm not going to say who he is. Maybe we will talk about it together when the whole project is live. But he
sure.
said this was a really good it put some pressure on my part, but it was a really good thing to hear, because he said, um, I'm so relieved that you have some sort of format, that there's a way for us to get something together something done within 1 or 2 weeks, because the other people that I've talked to, they told me, oh, this is going to take like 4 months of scoping out, 4 weeks of scoping out and 2 months of work, and that doesn't work. Like, he needed something to go live in 8 days. I'm like, sure, why not? I don't.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to cut some corners, but you're gonna have your product, you're gonna have your brand, and then we're gonna keep working on it. I'm like, let's do it.
Yeah. I mean, that is ultimately, if you can figure out a way to like consistently show up and bring that consistent value in that like super time constrained format, then yeah, by all means. And that's what people want. Like that's what founders need.
Right.
Or they don't have the time or the money, the luxury of the runway to
Yeah.
take 4 weeks to scope out,
Right.
just scope out before they even get into design, which takes another couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So being able to just like boom, drop in and drop a bunch of work. I mean, yeah, it's a tremendous value. But let's look at, just to kind of come back to sort of maybe
Hmm.
like scaling this up. If you're talking about 1 week of sprint equals 4 to 6 weeks of building, then you can sort of just, I don't know if this works so perfectly, but you can just kind of like scale that up, right? Sort of linearly. Like if I can get a 1 to 4 ratio of input versus output, one week of input work, sprint, hard sprint, to
Right.
4 to 6 weeks of output building time,
Right.
then what does 4 weeks get me, right? Well, then I've got 16 weeks of output, right? I've got 3 or 4 months
Right.
potentially, right?
Yeah.
So the maths in that sense, this is very quick
I think so.
whiteboard napkin designer math, but like, if that's what you're finding from clients that are telling you, are coming back to you and being like, hey man, that was really helpful, I've got like, I'm going to be busy for the next month, that's great.
It's not just that. This like, you probably can imagine that this whole sprints experiment was the educational, uh, adventure. Um, one of the sprints participants, they now want to ramp up and do like a product. So we had a call with the development studio who's actually going to build the app, and everybody from the client team and me. And what happened was that the obviously the developers were just waiting to be told what they have to do, right? And I'm in a bit of a stuck between a rock and a hard place, because I have to make the designs off of which they will develop, right? And the client team they have a lot of ideas, but obviously even slight changes in these ideas means, going from one screen to five, and I'm oversimplifying here, right? And changing implementation time. So I'm also acting as a PM of sorts. And there was a moment when I had to say, guys, this is everybody's got ideas, but we have to kind of make it real, otherwise we're going to keep talking forever. It wasn't just about the call. I could see this slipping off. I could feel it.
Yeah.
So you must have been in so many meetings like that, right? And so, you know what I did? I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do the classic dot voting on FigJam. I set up a FigJam. I did the open session and the sticky notes and stuff. And the amount of clarity that produced, like, they not only if they added their own sticky notes, but now they know that that's going to result in 2 or 3 months of work. So they have a much more practical knowledge of what it means to work, and they trust you to not just do pixels, but put it in the context of real product development, right?
Yeah.
And even just that, which is not, I didn't charge them for it, right? But even just that shows how, if you can do that, like if you can do this in a professional way, shows the like a glimpse of the value they can bring with actual design. So um
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's sort of that, the real underlying value of design is not just being able to produce a set of assets for a client. It's being able to, and this is really where like my philosophy
right.
and foundations like really lay in, like being able to like help a team essentially like learn design themselves by guiding them through design exercises Like that's where you're really providing deep value that's going to keep people coming back to you. And set you apart from the guy who's just doing logos on Twitter for, you know, $200 or $20 or whatever, or a
Yeah.
Fiverr freelancer that's just a mercenary for hire. Like really being able to understand and bring forward design frameworks, introduce them to teams that aren't familiar with them, and walk them through it in a way that, you know, ultimately, like they're coming up with the ideas themselves, but you're just there to facilitate it and sort of guide them through the process. That's incredible value.
Also separates you from a lot of, you mentioned Fiverr designers making logos and stuff. Also separates you from a lot of AI tools, which can do those things, but they can't do the sprints. They can't do that like a, I don't know how to describe it in terms of AI, but they can't do that yet.
Yeah, of course. Well, AI is only as helpful as what you know what to ask it, right? And
Yes.
so if you're not familiar with a design sprint process, you're not familiar with the frameworks that designers use to bring design value into business, like you're just going to be, you know, floundering for a while. And you know, I can't imagine what that process looks like for someone who's trying to use AI but doesn't know what to ask it, right? It's probably not very productive.
I I can give you a very recent concrete example. Um, so there's a mini app, and mini apps, they don't need a connect wallet button because you already have Farcaster wallet. And if you're in Base, I'm assuming you're using the Base wallet for sure, so it's
Mhm.
embedded. So you don't need either a connect wallet or even Privy for that matter.
Mhm.
And I said, oh, but we want to have Privy so that it's not, our users pool isn't limited to the size of Farcaster and Base. I'm like, fair enough, but then that means that you want it to be a web app as well, not just a mini app, right?
Right.
And so that means that it's the web page, which can resize and be on a bunch of devices, a bunch of browsers, and browsers, the which is like, it can be so easy but so hard at the same time. It just
Yeah.
opens up, right? So I'm like, you can do this, you can just YOLO it, and it shouldn't be like you just have one of those iOS apps that are just full ported into iPad and are just plastered onto the whole screen. They're just, everything is too big, and it's
Yeah.
like it works, but you know, or you could do it properly. But if you do it properly, that's like a whole, maybe not a whole sprint right there, but it extends the scope of work. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
right.
Yeah,
So
responsiveness is a pain in the ass. It takes a lot of time to get right.
yeah. So that's one of the things, just one of the things, with one of the sticky notes that were part of this, scoping workshop.
For
So
sure. It's that I mean, you touched on a really interesting trade-off for mini app developers or developers on Farcaster who are trying to reach like a broader audience, right? Like
mhm,
one of the cool things about mini apps is it is a really tight, constrained box. You don't really have to worry about responsiveness. You don't have to worry about
which is good, it's great.
cross device access because it's going to show up the same on any device. That's a really valuable thing for getting a product off the ground really quickly because you
Yeah,
don't have to spend the time worrying
yeah.
about how this thing's going to show up on different browsers or in iOS or Android or whatever. But it does limit your audience, right? So it's trade-offs that a builder has to understand, right?
Yeah, but it limits your audience. If you're launching the product, you're going to have a smaller audience, and you can think about it later what you want to do. Sergio actually had a very good point yesterday. He said that he would never try to cram too much into a mini app, because a mini app is only meant to be a limited, purpose product, and
Right.
so this is not. A lot of people have different opinions of it. I know that there are very complex mini apps, but this is a good food for thought. Like in this particular example, it's a good thing to consider, guys. When you would do the move to the web app, maybe do a bigger restructure when it's a real website and not just an app. Like it's a different approach. And but you keep the mini app as it is, so you kind of consider, okay, when we do the move to the web app, what happens to the mini app, because that's another thing, right?
Right.
So it's difficult, it's not easy, but yeah.
I mean, mini is in the name, right? You don't want to.
It is.
It's
Fair
right
enough.
there in the name, you know.
Fair enough.
Yeah, like I think an ideal mini app experience should you really should only have like one core user flow in that
Mm,
thing, right?
yeah,
You're opening that app for like kind of one purpose.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, obviously you can scale that and expand it, but you're probably pushing the bounds of what that mini app can do at that point. One thing we never really, unfortunately, never really built at Decent that I always thought would have been really like fantastic was essentially taking different features from the Decent web app and porting them into a mini app, like governance or token lockups and things like that. Um, if you have this big vision for a larger product platform and you want to do multiple things, that's an opportunity to build several mini apps, not
Yeah,
try and
yes,
cram them all
yes.
into one, right?
Yeah.
Build a staking mini app, build a swapping mini app, right? But maybe you can squeeze those into one, but give those things room to breathe so that you can really master that user experience and stand out from the 20 other spin to win, staking, whatever mini apps that are out there.
Um, that's a good point. And that's also like not even a best practice. It's like a what the bigger company do on a real app store, on the app store. They don't
Yeah.
do super apps. They do specific apps, right? There's Nanar has the Nanar AI with they're not planning to spin them off for now.
Hmm.
I tried to push that internally. But yeah, I would. It's
Well, it's honestly it's to the developer's benefit to expand that vision to multiple apps as well, because the only active leaderboard that's still paying people on Farcaster is the developer leaderboard, right? And
it's-
so if you have more apps, that's more opportunities for people to see your work, your app up and down the leaderboard. You can own more of that space and that mind share and also get paid for it.
but so far the two groups of people that I've seen is that so individual developers who just do a bunch of projects, they have no issue with doing a bunch of different mini apps, and they're trying to
Yeah.
run up the leaderboard, so they're fine with this. But when teams are trying to build brand equity, they want to keep the one mini app because obviously that's the logo is up there on the leaderboard, so that's another the way they're thinking about it, which is fine as
Yeah.
well. Yes.
Well, and that's where like brand architecture is a thing to consider, right?
Yeah.
Like totally, you want to capture as much brand equity as possible, but if you're trying to like do a super app, there is a way to still capture that brand equity
Yeah.
across multiple apps, right? You can name it, you can have like a house of brands that, or I'm sorry, a branded house that has like Antimo steak, Antimo chatbot, Antimo whatever, right? And
Yeah.
that still funnels into your brand equity, but it's just spread out and more fragmented, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I was actually so we were actually I was actually meaning to to not go this long today, but because I
Oh,
my yeah,
no worries.
let's so I'm gonna get recording for this and somehow get a transcription and put it somewhere so we I can start to develop a like uh, I don't know what to call it, context, right?
Yeah,
Uh, so we have a starting point next time we talk. But yeah, let's pick it up again next week, maybe in the chat as well. But I'll even just that tidbit about scoping down, having an order of magnitude, scoping it down to a quarter. That's really something. For me, that's good. Food for thought. I hope you got something out of it as well.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you sent me a fantastic resource
Yeah,
to
yeah,
to
guys,
model
really
my
good.
own business after.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, this has been helpful, man.
Sure.
Yeah, really great conversation, man. I appreciate the time and yeah, let's keep it going. Let's meet up again. I maybe in between now and our next conversation, let's talk through some
Yeah, of
more,
course,
get
of
into the
course.
weeds a little bit more now that there is something to kind
Something,
of chew
yeah.
on here.
Yeah. Before I leave you, something crazy. I was thinking, I was in, the guy that I sent you, this Kevin Twohy, like it took me a minute to remember his name. And the guy that you sent me, the other website, the value pricing, which is called Dan Mole, I had him on the timeline as well. And there was one tweet that he just put out that I didn't bookmark, but I really wanted to bookmark. And I was thinking yesterday while driving, shit, I really should try to remember the name of these guys because I just have this on a list somewhere, but I don't actually have a mental image. And I really
Yeah.
should spend more time studying these really great designers because it's a good like mental archetype to have in your mind and not just some random links. So I'm gonna try to do that more purposefully, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I kind of went down that rabbit hole with Dan Mall
Yeah.
last week, and it was great. I mean, I knew him as the design systems guy, but I found his podcast with The Future, where he was talking about starting his own agency and sort of went into his story of how he kind of started as an entry level designer, but like wasn't satisfied with essentially just being handed a job ticket and wanted to, he was like, I've got ideas. I want these ideas. I want to like contribute my ideas to the project, not just be the guy that executes other people's ideas.
Yeah.
And it was an incredible story. And yeah, it turns out this guy's like freaking super smart,
Oh,
super like
you,
on
you
it.
you you can
Yeah,
tell it's pretty great. With these guys, with Dan Mole, Kevin Twohy, I always have this nagging feeling. I don't believe you're that good with so many people because they're too good. But maybe we'll be there too in 5 years or so.
that's the hope, man. One day.
Oh yeah, we will. All right. Hey, probably gonna end it right here. Thanks a bunch for doing this. Sorry about the changing the time yesterday. But it's good. Let's pick it up later, and you have
Yeah,
a good weekend in the meantime. I'll clip this and put this on timeline next week because you know.
sounds good, man. This was
All right,
awesome. Same to
nice,
you. Have a great weekend. And yeah, thanks for having me on. It was a blast.
nice. See you.
Cheers.
Bye bye.